Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM Today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Thursday, 17th April 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China is actively asserting its influence on the global stage through economic partnerships, technological advancements, and diplomatic maneuvers. President Xi Jinping concluded a three-nation Southeast Asian tour, including Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia, seeking to strengthen ties and promote stability amid global economic turmoil, particularly emphasizing opposition to unilateral bullying and aiming for joint opposition to hegemonism and power politics. In Cambodia, Xi Jinping lauded China's ironclad relationship during talks with Prime Minister Hun Manet and King Norodom Sihamoni. During the tour, interregional rail transport was a key agenda item. China seeks to position itself as the region's most dependable trade partner, and Chinese investment surges in Cambodia, driving a Mandarin learning boom as locals recognize the importance of language skills for business opportunities and economic growth. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang met with Chinese trade officials in Beijing, coinciding with a House Select Committee investigation into NVIDIA's chip sales across Asia to determine if they violate U.S. rules. China is facing a complex economic landscape characterized by deflation and escalating trade tensions with the United States. China refuses to back down amid the trade dispute sparked by U.S. tariffs, filing a new complaint with the World Trade Organization, expressing grave concern and accusing Washington of violating the global trade body's rule. China stated it will ignore U.S. tariff numbers game. China plans to host a UN event to denounce U.S. tariffs and bullying to rally international support against Donald Trump's measures. JDD.com Inc. suggests long-term solutions involve boosting social security, raising incomes, and promoting urbanization to make the country more dependent on domestic consumption. With the U.S. market closed off, Chinese exporters are scouring the globe for new buyers with mixed results. Beijing's tougher tariff response to the U.S. reflects a new understanding of Washington's aims under Trump too, according to analysts. Director General Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala fears the economies of China and the U.S. decoupling from one another due to the tariff war. China is making strides in technology and innovation, including electric vehicles and nuclear energy. Our Technologies Company Limited and state-owned SAIC Motor Corp. Limited. New electric vehicle EV brand will debut its first model this fall. BYD slashed the price of its Titanium 3 electric SUV, which includes a new advanced driver assistance system, capitalizing on Tesla's China challenges. Beijing warns EV makers and technology providers to adhere to development rules and take care not to overstate capabilities in self-driving technology. China also has the world's first operational thorium nuclear reactor, a milestone achieved by completing fuel reloading, while the experimental molten salt reactor was running. Chinese tech firms are expanding into the global market for smart lawn-mowing robots, especially in Europe, due to demand for eco-friendly tools and advances in boundary-free navigation technology. China is also working to expand its influence in the Americas, with its ties viewed as a net positive for the whole region, suggesting Washington should embrace Beijing's relationships with its southern neighbors. A China delegation is visiting Brazil to discuss a railway link to a Peru megaport, with major infrastructure projects on the table, as Beijing eyes a boost in trade ties. Concerns have been raised regarding human rights issues in China, specifically in Xinjiang, where the Uyghur Human Rights Project, or URP, reports nearly 200 international hotels are operating or planned, despite human rights concerns. The URP suggests that some hotels have links to forced labor and labor transfer programs and benefit from a presence in the euro region. Across the Pacific, the United States is preparing for long-term competition with China for global dominance, marked by trade disputes and geopolitical maneuvering. The U.S. has started to prepare seriously for a long-term competition with China for global dominance. Washington and Beijing remain locked in a standoff, each expecting the other to initiate trade negotiations. The U.S. has imposed tariffs on Chinese goods, prompting retaliatory measures from Beijing, and a new complaint filed with the WTO. The EU is drawing lessons from clashes with China as it faces off against the U.S. under Donald Trump in a worsening trade war. Americans' dislike for China has softened, with a recent Pew survey showing negative attitudes remaining at 77%, but the percentage with very unfavorable views dropping 10 points. Secretary of State Marco Rubio put about 40 employees on leave who had tracked disinformation by China, Russia, Iran, and terrorist groups, and diplomats are bracing for a series of deep cuts at the State Department. Former New York cop Michael McMahon was sentenced to 1.5 years in jail for acting as an agent of China without notifying the U.S. Attorney General. Turning to Asia, China is reportedly manipulating civil conflict in Myanmar to secure regional dominance. Meanwhile, in Vietnam, President Xi Jinping urged the country to join China in opposing unilateral bullying during his visit to Hanoi. The United States is facing mounting challenges from scrutiny over President Trump's trade policies, which are being criticized as inept and potentially inflationary, to legal battles involving tech giants and immigration policies. Trump has also threatened Harvard University's tax-exempt status and foreign student programs, claiming the institution is no longer decent. A U.S. judge ruled that Google monopolized online ad markets, potentially leading to significant changes in its business practices. Simultaneously, another judge found cause to hold the Trump administration in contempt over deportations to El Salvador, citing noncompliance with a court order. The average rate on a 30-year mortgage in the U.S. reached its highest level in 8 weeks, climbing to 6.83%. Turning to China, NVIDIA's CEO Jensen Huang recently visited Beijing shortly after U.S. restrictions on AI chip sales were imposed. As the decoupling between the U.S. and China intensifies, suppliers are reassessing their relationships. Chinese students are increasingly considering studying in the UK due to visa concerns in the U.S. A congressional report alleges that Chinese AI firm DeepSeek has ties to the Communist Party and poses a security threat to the U.S. Goldman Sachs estimates that $370 billion in Chinese firms' ADRs could be at risk if US market ties are severed. Chinese drone and flying taxi developers are targeting the U.S. market despite tariffs. Ex-New York Police Sergeant Michael McMahon was sentenced to 1.5 years for acting as a Chinese agent, convicted of stalking a U.S. resident as part of Operation Fox Hunt. The U.S. is sanctioning a Chinese oil refiner and shipping companies for covert business with Iran. In Australia, climate change debates are raging, with opposition leader Peter Dutton affirming his belief in climate change after initial hesitation, drawing criticism from various groups. Former Prime Minister Turnbull noted that negative gearing has been examined by every government. Australia is launching a talent program to attract us academics potentially affected by research cuts, while a report accuses Sydney's Northern Beaches Hospital of healthcare standard failures. Australians' trust in the U.S. has decreased due to Trump's tariffs and unpredictability, but support for the U.S. alliance remains strong. Rugby Australia accuses France of poaching younger players. Focusing on Iran, the UN nuclear watchdog states that US-Iran talks are at a crucial stage. One watchdog chief, Rafael Grossi, stated that Iran is not far from having a nuclear bomb ahead of a second round of talks between Iran and the U.S. The U.S. is sanctioning a Chinese oil refiner and shipping companies for covert business with Iran amid Washington's denuclearization talks. Shifting to France, Aix-Marseille University offered scientific asylum to US-based researchers amid crackdowns on academia in the USA. Rugby Australia accuses France of poaching younger players. Meanwhile, North Korea issued a warning to the US following a joint air drill with South Korea, viewing it as a rehearsal for an attack. In other developments, it has been found that toothpaste is widely contaminated with lead and other dangerous heavy metals. The 28% US tariff means Kashmir's imported carpets will become significantly more expensive for American consumers. Global South countries are asserting their economic visions. Turkish PhD student Rumeysa Öztürk was denied bond by an immigration judge. The Northern Marianas received top honors at the Marine Diving Awards. An Australian company is applying to mine the Taranaki seabed under a fast-track law, facing opposition. Israel's ongoing conflict with Palestine has intensified, leading to a humanitarian crisis. Israeli military actions have resulted in a security zone encompassing 30% of Gaza, displacing Palestinians into smaller areas, especially in the south and along the coastline. The defense minister indicated that troops will remain in these security zones indefinitely in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria. Recent Israeli air attacks on tent camps for displaced people in Gaza, including Al-Mawasi and Beit Lahia, caused many deaths, including children, with at least 35 Palestinians killed in a 24-hour period, and one strike, killing a family of 10. At least 23 people have been killed in Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip. An Israeli strike on the Mawasi area of southern Gaza killed at least a dozen people. Israel did not confirm the location of the attack. Hamas accuses Israel of weaponizing aid as Gaza's hunger crisis worsens. Israeli Minister Israel Katz stated, "There are no plans to allow aid into Gaza, as blocking aid is considered a main pressure lever on Hamas. This blockade is a strategy confirmed by the defense minister." International lawyer Lara Alborno reports that life expectancy in Gaza has been reduced by 46%, and the situation is worsening due to Israel blocking aid. Palestinians displaced by Israeli raids in the West Bank are facing severe shortages of shelter, with approximately 40,000 people displaced. The Palestinian Authority provides limited assistance, and the UN Refugee Agency struggles to meet the overwhelming needs due to Israeli restrictions. Israel is accused of using water as a strategic aim and weapon of war. Shifting to international relations involving Israel, Israeli Minister Gideon Sa'ar's private visit to the UK prompted activist groups to request his arrest, citing Israel's intensified offensive in Gaza. In other international matters, former US President Donald Trump reportedly waved off a planned Israeli strike on Iranian nuclear sites, which Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had discussed with him. Some administration officials had reservations about the strike. Trump blocked the planned strike to secure a deal with Tehran, aiming to delay Iran's nuclear weapons development by a year or more. Japan's economic future is clouded by uncertainty as it navigates trade discussions with the U.S. regarding import tariffs. Japan presented figures showing a $63 billion trade surplus with the U.S., despite a $5.22 trillion trade deficit in FY 2024 and a deficit in its March-April fiscal year. President Donald Trump unexpectedly joined preliminary talks with the Japanese trade delegation, calling the discussions big progress. Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is working to foster a relationship with Trump akin to that of Shinzo Abe. While initial talks were positive, disagreements persist between Japan and the U.S. Japan's export growth has slowed since the start of Trump's tariff campaign, which has also triggered retaliatory actions from countries like China. The tariff discussions may also involve Japan's increasing dependence on U.S. rice imports due to rising domestic prices. The U.S. supplies 60% of Japan's tariff-free rice import limits. Meanwhile, Japanese online brokerage accounts are facing a growing hacking threat. Rakuten Securities reported account breaches, and Nomura Securities, SPI Securities, and other companies have reported similar incidents. High-profile scandals linked to baseball stars and comedians have also exposed a lack of public understanding about illegal betting via online casino. In Nara, police are increasing patrols to address animal abuse after a video surfaced showing a tourist kicking one of the city's deer, which are revered. El Salvador was at the center of a legal and political storm when the Trump administration considered sending immigrants, including potentially U.S. citizens, to a maximum security prison there, sparking constitutional concerns and court challenges. This situation intensified with the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Maryland resident wrongfully deported to El Salvador and imprisoned. Despite court orders and a Supreme Court ruling, the Trump administration allegedly delayed his return, prompting criticism from Senator Chris Van Hollen, who was denied a meeting with Garcia by President Nayib Bukele and Senator Cory Booker, who planned a visit. The deportation of 238 migrants to an El Salvador prison, allegedly as members of a Venezuelan gang, also faced scrutiny after a New York Times investigation cast doubt on the administration's claims. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy anticipates a forthcoming US minerals agreement. He also claims Ukraine possesses evidence indicating Chinese weapon supplies to Russia, alleging Chinese involvement in weapon production within Russian territory. Amid intensified attacks on Ukrainian cities, Kyiv has expressed interest in purchasing us Patriot air defense system. Tragically, a child was among 3 fatalities resulting from a recent Russian assault. Meanwhile, Vitaly Drobnitsia, a former Ukrainian history educator, utilizes chatroulette to counter Kremlin propaganda, although he acknowledges his primary engagement is now with Ukrainian audiences. Russia is intensifying its military operations across all Ukrainian fronts. Further, President Zelenskyy has publicly criticized Witkoff for allegedly disseminating what he describes as a Russian narrative. In the United Kingdom, the Labour Party dispatched a delegation to scrutinize Keir Starmer's successful election campaign, with a specific focus on podcast strategies. Separately, Kemi Badenoch has advocated for a comprehensive reassessment of equality and gender recognition legislation, asserting its obsolescence. Kishore Faulkner, the chair of the RC, has hinted at potential legal challenges concerning the effectiveness of gender recognition certificates. GRC. A UK rights commissioner has detailed facilities, such as women's restrooms and sports teams, from which transgender women will be excluded following a Supreme Court decision. Adding to national security concerns, the UK is grappling with the use of Chinese DJI drones at sensitive locations. Entities like National Grid and Thames Water are employing these drones for inspections, despite existing warnings. France recently hosted high-level discussions in Paris, centering on Ukraine's future and security, with participation from US envoy Marco Rubio, Witkoff, European dignitaries, and prominent Ukrainian officials. These discussions, which included Macron welcoming US envoy Marco Rubio, were prompted by recent Russian airstrikes resulting in at least 6 deaths, and aimed to explore the possibility of a truce in the conflict. Australia's Labour Party formulated a new media strategy aimed at engaging disaffected voters, enlisting the firm responsible for the Batuta advocate. This strategy provided guidance to Prime Minister Anthony Albanese regarding his appearances on podcasts. China faces accusations from Ukraine's President Zelenskyy, who claims to have evidence of China providing weapons to Russia, particularly alleging Chinese representatives are involved in weapon production on Russian soil. Moreover, the United Kingdom is experiencing security apprehensions regarding the deployment of Chinese DJI drones at critical infrastructure sites. India is set to host U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance for a 4-day visit starting April 21. Vance is scheduled to meet with Prime Minister Modi to discuss the potential finalization of a bilateral trade agreement. In other news, a 24-year-old American YouTuber is being held in custody in India. He visited a restricted island in the Indian Ocean in the previous month and attempted to gift Diet Coke to an isolated tribe. Turning to the United States, Vice President J.D. Vance, accompanied by his family, will visit Italy and India for meetings with leaders and cultural engagements. In the legal sphere, Neil K. Anand, a doctor of Indian origin, was convicted in the U.S. for healthcare fraud involving false claims and illegal distribution of controlled substances. Indian student Chinmay Deor has initiated a lawsuit against the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, claiming that he and other students did not engage in criminal activity, breach immigration laws, or participate in political demonstration. Furthermore, an Indian student and 3 others have filed a lawsuit to prevent their potential deportation from the U.S., adding to similar legal efforts in states such as New Hampshire, Indiana, and California. Ukraine remains a focal point as U.S. officials engage in high-level diplomacy. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff traveled to Paris. They met with European allies and senior Ukrainian officials. Discussions focused on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine conflict and Donald Trump's ceasefire efforts. Turning to Canada, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has launched a review. This review concerns Therm's Toronto waterfront lease. The move follows a New York Times investigation. The investigation suggested Therma exaggerated its track record. Government auditors also found the lease process unfair and opaque. The lease spans 95 years. Iran is nearing the capability to develop a nuclear bomb, according to the UN Watchdog chief. This warning comes as the Watchdog monitors Iran's nuclear program and its compliance with the 2015 nuclear deal, which dissolved following the United States' withdrawal under Donald Trump's presidency. Despite wavering signals from the U.S., Iran plans to continue participating in nuclear talks. Amid escalating tariff tensions with China, the United States is at odds in these trade disputes. Geopolitics and security experts suggest that New Zealand's Winston Peters is signaling to the United States to remain invested in the Pacific amidst concerns over Washington's retreat from the region. The United States previously withdrew from the World Health Organization's pandemic treaty negotiations after President Trump took office. China has appointed a new international trade negotiation representative at the Ministry of Commerce as tariff tensions with the United States intensify. The World Health Organization, WHO, has reached a compromise on a pandemic treaty after 3 years of discussions. The United States had previously withdrawn from these negotiations. Geopolitics and security experts suggest that New Zealand's Winston Peters is signaling to the United States to remain invested in the Pacific amidst concerns over Washington's retreat from the region. Russia's Supreme Court has officially removed the Taliban from its list of banned terrorist organizations, a designation that had been in effect since 2003. This action by Russia now allows for normalized ties with the Taliban leadership in Afghanistan. Agreements can be signed and relations improved with both Afghanistan and Syria's transitional government. Removing the terror group label means that contact with the Taliban is no longer punishable, which is expected to significantly ease diplomatic avenues. Meanwhile, Afghanistan is actively organizing the repatriation of its citizens currently living in Pakistan. The Afghan Consul General in Peshawar has confirmed that a special commission has been formed specifically to manage and oversee this repatriation process. Canada is preparing for a pivotal federal election on April 28. The initial televised debate featured Prime Minister Mark Carney of the Liberal Party and Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. The central point of contention was which leader is better prepared to navigate potential trade disputes and other challenges posed by Donald Trump. Poilievre emphasized the need for a change in leadership after 10 years of Liberal administrations, linking Carney to the policies of Justin Trudeau. Carney, in turn, asserted that Canadians should choose the leader with the demonstrated experience to effectively deal with Trump. Mark Carney, previously a central banker, assumed the role of Prime Minister after winning the Liberal Party leadership and is now campaigning in his first election to represent an Ottawa area constituency. Turning to the United States, a United Airlines Boeing 737-800, carrying 153 passengers and 6 crew members, experienced an emergency landing in Denver. The flight, destined for Canada, was diverted after a reported animal strike, which led to an engine fire. The plane landed safely. Unfortunately, no injuries were reported among passengers or crew. Italy is at the forefront as Premier Giorgia Meloni prepares to meet with Donald Trump at the White House, a move that will test her potential role as a bridge between the European Union and the former U.S. president. Meloni, recognized for her cooperative style within European politics, aligns with Trump on certain nationalist principles. In ecological news, Italy has experienced a remarkable recovery in its wolf population. These conservation initiatives have boosted its numbers after facing near extinction. Italy now proudly holds the largest wolf population in Europe, with organizations arranging small group tours for observing these animals in their natural environment. North Korea has reacted strongly to recent U.S. military actions, specifically condemning the deployment of long-range bombers over South Korea as a direct and unacceptable threat to its national security. South Korea faces potential trade headwinds with the United States, including the prospect of a 25% tariff imposition. South Korea's strong shipbuilding capabilities might offer a negotiating advantage, aligning with President Trump's ambition to rejuvenate U.S. shipbuilding. Domestically, a new visa initiative intended to alleviate labor shortages is stirring controversy. A citizen-led petition is advocating for the termination of a region-specific skilled worker visa, spotlighting worries about heightened job competition. A South Korean man has been apprehended for allegedly murdering 5 relatives due to debt-related anxieties. The crime has triggered widespread calls for tougher legal repercussions for familicide, which represents a substantial portion of the nation's murder cases. Myanmar marked its traditional New Year with the release of around 4,900 prisoners, which included 13 foreign nationals who were then pardoned and deported. Families and friends congregated outside Insane Prison in Yangon as the amnesty took place. The exact number of political prisoners released remains uncertain. Simultaneously, Myanmar's military leader traveled to Thailand to discuss earthquake relief with Thai officials, with Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim also in attendance. Peace restoration efforts in Myanmar are expected to be discussed as well. Brazil's climate commitment is under scrutiny as the Amazon faces record drought and deforestation driven by beef production. JBS, the world's largest meat company, is predicted to break its pledges to protect the Amazon rainforest. The Serra Verde rare earths mine, backed by American investors, will sell nearly all of its product to China, highlighting China's control over strategic minerals. Russia saw President Putin thanking Hamas for the release of Russian hostages, emphasizing Russia's long-standing ties with the Palestinian people and diverse organizations. Shifting focus to the Palestinian territories, Samar Abu Elouf, a Palestinian photographer, received recognition at the World Press Photo Competition for her work depicting the human impact of war in Gaza. The World Press Photo Award highlighted the story of Mahmoud Ajour, a 9-year-old Palestinian boy from Gaza who tragically lost both arms in an Israeli attack the year prior. Across the Atlantic, in the United States, Bondi denounced the arson targeting Gov. Shapiro's residence. While condemning the act, Bondi refrained from classifying it as domestic terrorism. Reports suggest that the alleged arsonist's motivation stemmed from Shapiro's policies related to the Palestinian people. Germany is at the center of a diplomatic tug-of-war, as Russia has issued a warning against supplying Taurus missiles to Ukraine, a move discussed within German political circles. Meanwhile, a teenager in eastern Germany is being investigated for the alleged production of ricin in his home, raising concerns about domestic security. Immigration remains a hot-button issue, underscored by the arrival of Afghan refugees, sparking debate over the country's approach to asylum policies under a new government. In related news, DJ and translator Tim Moore, famed for his work on celebrity memoirs, has died at 55. China is urging Asian nations to remain unified. President Xi Jinping hopes to discourage agreements with the U.S. that could negatively impact China. Meanwhile, Indiana University terminated cybersecurity professor Xiaofeng Wang, a Chinese national. This followed questions about undisclosed funding from China and an FBI raid on his homes. Wang has not been charged with any crime, sparking concern among Asian students. Turning to the United States, President Trump is factoring the expense of maintaining U.S. troops overseas into tariff talks with Asian allies. He has suggested potentially removing U.S. troops if financial demands aren't met. These trade and tariff discussions are causing some anxiety. Asian shares, however, mostly rose despite the trade war. Negotiations between the U.S. administration and Japan are being closely watched. South Africa has reopened its Cradle of Humankind caves to the public. This follows a nearly 3-year closure caused by flooding. The reopening includes a new tourist experience focused on ongoing scientific research. Meanwhile, in a separate event within South Africa, U.S. Pastor Josh Sullivan was rescued by police. He had been kidnapped while delivering a sermon in Motherwell. The rescue involved a shootout at a safe house, resulting in the deaths of 3 suspects. Bangladesh and Pakistan have restarted diplomatic talks after a long pause. Bangladesh hosted Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar, marking a significant step towards mending relations after a 15-year break in Foreign Office consultation. The European Union is considering new asylum rules. The European Commission wants to classify Kosovo, Bangladesh, Colombia, Egypt, India, Morocco, and Tunisia as safe countries of origin. This designation would allow for faster processing of asylum claims from these nations. The EU believes these countries are generally safe for their citizens. Cambodia is actively pursuing greater financial assistance from China, especially as the U.S. tariff war creates economic challenges. Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent 2-day state visit aimed to solidify the already robust ties between the two countries. China stands as Cambodia's largest creditor and has channeled billions into various Cambodian development projects. Furthermore, Chinese entities own a substantial portion, half of the Cambodian businesses involved in exports to the U.S. In related news, Cambodia recently marked the 50th anniversary of the Khmer Rouge's takeover. Photographer Roland Neveu, a Frenchman, recounted his experience witnessing the Khmer Rouge's entrance into Phnom Penh on April 17, 1975. This event initiated a period of extreme violence and upheaval in Cambodian society. Mexico's energy security is increasingly threatened by its dependence on natural gas imports from the United States, raising concerns about potential political leverage. The country relies heavily on these imports for electricity generation. Separately, Fire Festival 2nd, initially planned for May 30 to June 2 in Mexico, has been postponed. The event was intended to redeem the infamous 2017 festival, which led to Billy McFarland's conviction on wire fraud charges. Kenya witnessed an unusual legal case as 4 individuals, among them 2 Belgian teenagers, faced charges for attempting to smuggle thousands of ants, intending to sell them in European and Asian markets. They admitted guilt. In a more somber event, the burial of a Nigerian TikTok content moderator. Based in Kenya and recently deceased under unclear circumstances, took place in a public cemetery, with her colleagues commemorating her dedication. New Zealand is under observation regarding its future climate aid contributions. A Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade spokesperson stated that climate finance commitments post-2025 are yet to be determined by the government, following academic questioning of the country's current approach. Meanwhile, the Otautahi-based music group Loopy Tunes, celebrated for its Pasifika music aimed at preschoolers, launched a new album to commemorate Matariki, the Maori New Year. Furthermore, Mark Lundy, who was twice convicted of double murder, is slated for release from prison on parole in May, with his lawyer emphasizing that life imprisonment in New Zealand doesn't always mean indefinite incarceration. The International Court of Justice is currently considering a case where Sudan accuses the United Arab Emirates of aiding genocide. Sudan alleged that the UAE has been providing arms to the Rapid Support Forces, RSF, militia. The RSF is a key participant in Sudan's continuing civil war. Acting Justice Minister of Sudan, Moaya Osman, stated that the UAE's support, specifically the shipment of arms, is crucial to the alleged genocide. Sudan is requesting the ICJ to order the UAE to halt support for the RSF and to provide reparations for the damages caused. Simultaneously, within Sudan, civil activists are trying to mediate between the conflicting groups, even as they face harassment, arrests, and accusations of partiality, marking 2 years of ongoing conflict. France's President Emmanuel Macron recently addressed a dark chapter, acknowledging the historical injustice of France forcing Haiti to pay a hefty indemnity post-independence. Simultaneously in Paris, Macron engaged in diplomatic efforts, hosting a significant lunch. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Steve Witkoff, President Trump's envoy, were among the attendees during this gathering of European delegations. The Netherlands sees a high number of cyclist fatalities, with about 199 deaths each year in traffic incidents. A recent helmet campaign to improve cyclist safety has faced public resistance. Turning to Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is facing scrutiny over alleged foreign interference in recent elections. Intelligence reports suggest attempts by foreign actors to influence electoral outcomes. These allegations have sparked heated debate and calls for a public inquiry. In the United States, the Federal Reserve is closely monitoring inflation data as it considers future interest rate adjustments. Recent economic indicators suggest a mixed picture, with inflation remaining stubbornly above the Fed's target. The central bank's decisions will have significant implications for the U.S. and global economies. Shifting to France, President Emmanuel Macron is pushing forward with controversial pension reforms. The reforms aim to raise the retirement age, sparking widespread protests and labor strikes across the country. The changes are seen as necessary to ensure the long-term sustainability of the pension system. Meanwhile, in Australia, concerns are growing over the impact of climate change on the Great Barrier Reef. Rising ocean temperatures are causing coral bleaching and threatening the reef's delicate ecosystem. The Australian government is implementing measures to mitigate the effects of climate change on the reef. In Germany, discussions are ongoing regarding the country's energy policy in the wake of the Ukraine war. The reliance on Russian gas has prompted a shift towards renewable energy sources and diversification of energy supplies. Germany is aiming to reduce its carbon emissions and achieve energy independence. Indonesia is currently navigating complex international relations, with a recent report alleging Russia sought a permanent base for its warplanes in the Papua region. This proposal has stirred unease, especially in Australia, although experts believe Indonesia is unlikely to approve it. Despite this, Russia remains a key arms provider in Southeast Asia. Separately, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto's initiative to evacuate Palestinians from Gaza requires the consent of all involved nations. Peru is seeing political turmoil as former First Lady Nadine Heredia sought asylum at the Brazilian embassy in Lima, facing a potential 15-year prison sentence alongside her husband, former President Ollanta Humala, on money laundering charges. Latvia has officially withdrawn from the Ottawa Treaty, a 1997 agreement banning anti-personnel mines. This decision aligns Latvia with Poland and other Baltic states. The nations cite Russia's ongoing invasion of Ukraine as the main impetus. Argentina is grappling with an unusual situation in Nordelta, where a surge in the capybara population has sparked both admiration and discord among residents of this upscale gated community. The large rodents have become increasingly common, prompting debate about how to manage wildlife within residential areas. Moving north in Canada, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government is facing increasing pressure over rising inflation rates. Critics are questioning the effectiveness of current economic policies as Canadians grapple with higher costs for essential goods and services. The Bank of Canada is closely monitoring the situation, with potential adjustments to monetary policy on the horizon. Across the Atlantic, the United Kingdom is navigating complex post-Brexit trade negotiations with the European Union. Discussions are particularly tense regarding Northern Ireland, with both sides seeking to resolve issues related to trade and border controls. The outcome of these negotiations will significantly impact the UK's future economic relationship with the EU. Egypt experienced a significant decline in Suez Canal revenue, plummeting by nearly 2/3 in the past year. Officials attributed the steep decrease to regional tensions and conflicts in the Middle East, which have disrupted shipping traffic. Adding to the international cooperation, Chinese Y-20 transport aircraft have arrived in Cairo for the Eagle of Civilization 2025 joint air exercises. At least 5 planes have landed. Turkey's central bank has raised its key interest rate to 46% amidst ongoing political instability. This decision comes in the wake of escalating global tariffs and the controversial arrest of Istanbul's mayor. Simultaneously, in Ankara, Turkish police executed a massive anti-narcotics operation. The operation resulted in the detention of 525 individuals suspected of involvement in drug trafficking. Interior Minister Ali Yerlikaya hailed the event as the nation's largest ever anti-narcotics initiative. Vietnam is grappling with the long-lasting effects of the Vietnam War, explored through the personal journey of a war hero's granddaughter. Simultaneously, Vietnam's manufacturing sector is feeling the pressure from the ongoing global trade tensions. Factory owners are particularly concerned about the future, even with the temporary tariff reprieve announced by the U.S. France is collaborating with Haiti through a newly formed joint commission to delve into their intertwined history, addressing calls for reparations stemming from the indemnity Haiti was compelled to pay France after its 1825 revolution. Russia saw President Putin engaging in talks with Qatar's emir in Moscow, focusing on the state of affairs in Syria and Gaza. Qatar conveyed that Syria's new leader, Ahmed al-Sharaa, is seeking better relations with Moscow. Moving to Serbia, its populist president intends to participate in Vladimir Putin's W2 Victory Day parade in Moscow, even with pressure from the EU to reconsider. Zimbabwe is making efforts to foster improved relations with Donald Trump, offering compensation to white farmers and removing tariffs, a move that uniquely positions Zimbabwe as the sole nation to have suspended tariffs on imports from the United States. Somalia is facing renewed threats as al-Shabaab militants have launched an attack on a strategically important town that houses a major base for government troops, sparking concerns about the government's ability to maintain control. In Lebanon, the military has apprehended suspects believed to be linked to rocket attacks into Israel that occurred last month, heightening regional tensions. The Pacific region is currently dealing with public health concerns, particularly outbreaks of dengue fever and influenza, with Niue reporting cases of influenza, while Tonga and Fiji are grappling with dengue fever outbreaks. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.